Hi. All right. I welcome everyone. This is the Hate and Community. What can we do? And it's sponsored by the Arab American Family Services as well as the Illinois Department of Discrimination or Illinois Commission on Discrimination and Hate Crimes. And we're so thankful for everyone for joining us today. My name is Jim Bennett. I am the director of the Illinois Department of Human Rights, and I also chair the Illinois Commission on Discrimination and Hate Crimes. I am very happy to introduce the guest I have joining me today. Marvette Spice is an attorney and the past president of the Arab American Bar. She also serves with me as a commissioner on the Hate Crimes and Discrimination Commission. Norman White is with us, and Norman is the hate crimes victim advocate from the Chicago Commission on Human Relations and a valuable partner to the Illinois Department of Human Rights and the Hate Crimes Commission. And then Itadal Shalabi. I did it. Close. And a representative of the Arab American Family Services, and really who helped get the ball rolling. So we're so thankful to have you here, and really all of us coming together in a place of openness and working together and trying to make to take the temperature down and make the best of a situation that just feels out of control and so painful for so many of us. The state of hate and the weight of this moment is on us heavily. Hate crimes continue to rise, and that's just with the reported crimes that we know about, and we know that that's just the tip of the iceberg, that there is so much happening that people are afraid to tell or not knowing where to go. And we're hoping with that panic, the best thing you can do with panic is to provide information so that when you search your brain, there's something there to respond to. And that's what we're hoping to do today. We know that your community, especially the Arab American community, is feeling especially vulnerable right now. And it's a scary time. And so this is something everyone has experienced that's part of a minority class, but never have we seen such attention for so long that we have at this time. The Illinois Commission of Discrimination and Hate Crimes is here for this moment and to meet you. This commission was reestablished in 2021 under Governor Pritzker. It had sat dormant for nearly 11 or 12 years. Its goal is to identify and uproot sources of discrimination and bias at the source, while assisting with the development of resources, training, and information that allows for a swift and efficient response to hate-motivated crimes and incidents. We bring together commissioners who, as well as we can, represent all of the protected classes throughout Illinois. Our goal is to look as much on the commission as our state looks. And it's not an easy job, but it's one that we really strive to do. And we want to represent the communities because we know everything is interconnected. When one group is hurt, another group is hurt. One of the most insidious things of hate is that when something happens to one person, it has a chilling, fearful effect across that community. And so that's our goal to address that today.
Thank you, Director Bennett. And I echo all of his remarks. And, it's hopeful that we can come together in this way. And I want to thank AFS for inviting us to meet with you and to begin this relationship. You do a lot of great work on the ground with those directly impacted. And so thank you for that. Our purpose, and I want to reiterate, our purpose today is to support and empower your community by providing information about hate crimes, how to access resources and take action, and for us to learn how we might better serve you. And we're open to listening and learning. And I also want to mention that if anyone has questions, to email us, as in the chat box should be an email address. But at this time, I want to introduce you, Itadal Shalabi, director over at AAFS, who can start this segment by giving us an overview of examples and recent incidents. I know there's been quite an uptick in what's going on in the community. And so tell us what you're hearing and what you're seeing on the front line.
Absolutely, Marvet and Director Bennett, thank you so much for having us. Thank you for being here. Again, my name is I'tidal Shalabi, and I'm the co-founder and executive director at Arab American Family Services, along with my co-founder and director, Nerman Taha. We founded AFS in 2001 out of a deep commitment to address the many unmet needs and provide support to the growing Arab American population in the Chicagoland area. We are a multi-service and advocacy organization serving over 18,000 individuals every year. I want to share how proud Nariman and I are to have led the campaign to include the Middle Eastern North African MENA category in ethnic racial data collection in Illinois, the first state to do so in the nation, the law being passed by Representative Rashid and signed by Governor Pritzker just this August, an effort to no longer be invisible in our state. We reached out to Mervet after witnessing the rapid rise in hate crimes, discrimination, verbal attacks, death threats, intimidation, marginalization, and unfortunately, the murder of our 6-year-old child, Wadi Al Fahioumi, in his home next to his mother. Our community is always subjected to covert and overt acts of discrimination and hate, even by elected officials. However, just like in the aftermath of 9/11, as an entire community, we feel under siege. Like walking targets, these attacks just intensified and became more blunt and shameless when the Middle East is involved in global or domestic events, and the vitriol rhetoric from everyone, starting with our own president, our elected officials, to the blindly one-sided government resolutions passed, all the way to the extremely biased and one-sided reporting that permeates all the official media. All of these actions by our government and media stoke the fires of hate and directly contribute to the increase of these attacks on our community. I want to share, like Mervet asked, a few of these instances which have made it to the news, have not made it to the news, so you can understand how drastically our everyday lives have been affected and why we feel like vulnerable targets at this time. Last week, a letter was sent to Aqsa School which threatened a bombing, having to pick up a bombing, and then the school went on a soft lockdown with parents having to pick up their children, and then was closed the following day to protect the children. For me, it brought back memories when my children were at Universal School and we had to do the same thing in the wake of 9/11. This was a disruption to their education right, as well as to many parents who had their jobs disrupted as they had to take off to care for their kids' physical and mental well-being. A recent letter to the whole Muslim community in Bridgeview, which I live in, stated, "Leave by October 20th or we will kill you all." School teachers in mainstream schools that blamed our kids for all the violence in occupied territories, telling kids about Hamas and Palestine from a one-sided biased viewpoint. Children being harassed by other peers, being bullied, and administration suspending the child who's Palestinian. Our children not allowed to wear a shirt that says Palestine on it. Kids being asked, is your dad a terrorist? Kids are extremely vulnerable as they try to process both what is going on with their families across the globe, but also the treatment here as they are being bullied and accused of being terrorists by not only their other students, but also by school teachers and personnel. Women who wear the hijab like I do are open and visible targets, and they are threatened in public spaces every day. A woman was attacked in suburban Mariano while shopping. Women being screamed at while pumping gas, being told to go back home, being asked if they are hiding a bomb under their hijab, and other physical altercation aimed at removing their hijab. It makes women in our community scared to go public spaces and go about their daily routines. A young professional in a company who had the Palestinian scarf ikufiyya on his desk prior to October 7th, being told by HR to remove it or lose his job because it sent a threatening message. University students being punished for speaking out on Palestine, demonstrating, rallying for it. A professor at a local community college is given a talk about Hamas and the Palestinian issue from a biased and one-sided perspective, and we being informed by administration that it is her freedom of speech to talk about it in any way she wants. But the mere expression of our identity as Palestinians is a threat. Taking away our right to wear a kufiyya, which I have on because that is a sign that is a sign you support terrorism. A family who had a sign on her lawn for the last 2 years that says "Free Palestine" received a letter that stated, and I quote, "This is the United States of America, not Palestine. Remove the sign or burn." It's only been 2 weeks or so, but these actions have only started. And we need to know how to support our community. By law, our community deserves to be protected, to live in safety and dignity, to ensure these hateful, racist comments are stopped, and those that continue to pursue these types of actions are prosecuted. We do not want another Wadi al Fahim or even worse tragedy on our hands. We don't want to take our hijab off to fit in, so we don't face harassment, hateful looks, comments, or God forbid, physically attacked. We have a right to be proud of who we are and have a right to express our cultural identity with our Palestinian t-shirts and kufiya. So we are grateful for this opportunity to have you inform our community, to educate us on our rights, how to file a hate crime complaint, how to file a discrimination complaint against a person or institution. We can no longer be invisible. I would like to turn it back to you, Tamarvet, and thank you again for having us here.
Thank you, Itidal, for sharing all of that. And it's, I know, not easy to hear these examples, but necessary so that we can address them. Jim?
Thank you. And we'll try to hit both because hate crimes and discrimination have two different sort of means of protection. So throughout this, we'll be going through it. I believe we have a slide on what a hate crime is. So one more slide up, please. Could we advance one slide? Perfect. Thank you. So what is a hate crime? A hate crime is a crime that is motivated in whole or substantial part by a bias against certain personal characteristics. Hate itself is not a crime. Hate crimes must include both the crime and hate, which means that they must target someone based on their real or perceived characteristics. So what does that mean? There must be a crime. According to Illinois law, there needs to be an underlying crime in order to be an incident or for the incident to be classified as a hate crime. Authorities need to determine that there was a crime committed. If it's determined that the crime was committed and motivated by bias, then hate crime charges can be added to the original charge. And there must be hate, which means that the action must target someone based on the following actual or perceived characteristics: race, color, creed, religion, ancestry, gender, sexual orientation, physical or mental disability, citizenship, immigration status, or national origin of another individual or groups of individuals. Next slide, please.
And these are on slide 3. I'll wait a moment. We want to offer some examples of hate-related crimes that are forbidden by the law. I know sometimes it seems obvious, but breaking it down this way is to help you understand your rights. Some examples of hate-related crimes, as opposed to incidents, are threats that are either verbal or written, physical assault or attempted assault, hate-related graffiti, including swastikas and other offensive symbols, cross burning, bomb threats, arson, disturbance of religious meetings, and vandalism or property damage. And this list sadly touches on the instances that Itidel from AAFS provided us, that she has witnessed and heard through her organization in just the past 2 weeks. If we can jump to slide 4, please. And what we're breaking down is an understanding of hate crimes and hate incidents. Hate incidents, on the other hand, are incidents motivated by bias that are not classified as crimes. Still important to recognize. Non-criminal hate activity often is protected by free speech and can include rallies, sometimes offensive signs or t-shirts, leafleting and flyer distribution and group meetings. Attempts to regulate speech face substantial constitutional hurdles, as you can imagine. They are hostile expressions that may be motivated by another person's actual or perceived identities. And these kinds of incidents may include name calling, using a racial, ethnic, or other slur to identify someone, or using degrading language, creating racist or derogatory images or drawings, imitating someone with a disability or cultural norm or practice. So an example of a woman wearing a hijab reported that she was walking down the street when people in a car circled the block 3 times, yelling anti-Muslim hate speech and holding up, offensive sign language. It's offensive and it's hateful, but it's not a crime. And it's important to understand this, not that we're justifying it, but conversations like these are important, and not dehumanizing others is important to help create a society where this isn't tolerated. The First Amendment, as you know, establishes and protects our freedom of expression and speech. And unfortunately, that includes hate speech as long as it does not interfere with the civil rights of others. While these acts are hurtful and have a traumatic effect on victims and the community, they are not criminal. And why we say this is, if there's an expectation that these instances should be prosecuted, understand why there may be limitations to that. Does not mean, and I want to reiterate this, does not mean that there's not other ways to combat that, which is dialogue, educating, and working with one another. So some examples of protected speech that may be hateful but not illegal are those that we just described. And what we often say as a matter of recourse is walk away if you can safely, protest peacefully, and write. These are recourses as a way to hopefully educate, which I think is a major problem and underlying issue behind those that use protected hate speech.
Thank you. The next slide. So this is a little bit about the Illinois Human Rights Act. So some history. The Illinois Human Rights Act is about 45 years old. It's one of the most comprehensive and strongest human rights laws in our nation. And then the act created two agencies. It created the Illinois Department of Human Rights, of which I'm the director. And in short, we're investigators. We're law enforcement. And if you come to us, we would launch an investigation to see if there was discrimination that took place. And then if we find substantial evidence, then it goes to the Commission on Human Rights, and they act as the judges and try to make that situation whole. If I could get one message across about our department, would be that if you believe you've experienced discrimination, come to us. File a complaint. Let us determine if there is if in our investigation, if something had happened that is against the law. And if you're not sure, come to us. Some incidents may violate the Illinois Human Rights Act, such as denying someone housing, employment, safe access to public spaces, the ability to gather, sexual harassment in schools. All of these should be reported to us. The cost of hate incidents and hate crimes. The victims of hate crimes are twice as likely to experience fear, difficulty sleeping, anxiety, panic attacks, depression, compared with victims of non-hate motivated crimes. So even though it feels like the same act on the surface, when hate is attached to it, it is that much worse. All of these incidents, whether they're hate crimes or hate incidents, cause significant harm, not just to the individual victim, which is huge, but also entire communities. Hate crimes target communities. So for example, when we look in Skokie, when there were swastikas painted on the sides of buildings, not only did it hurt that building, but all the people around felt uncomfortable, and it creates a new level of fear. The threatening of someone, telling them they can not wear their the clothes that they want to wear, or anything like that, to target someone for who they are. It's meant to threaten, intimidate, and divide, making that community unsafe and unwelcome, not the values of our state. And we know that hate is connected. We know that most perpetrators that hate one protected class, Muslims, African Americans, Jews, LGBTQ people, immigrants, and the list goes on, are likely going to hate people in other protected classes. Hate is indeed interconnected. It's like a cancer. At the Commission on Discrimination and Hate Crimes, we see the interconnection of all of these forms of hate, and we're working together to counter them. Even though we come from each of our different protected classes, our goal, and I think many of the members of the Commission, is to see their community and to recognize that interconnectedness with other communities. We know that we have to work together, stand together against hate. And then the next slide up for Marvette.
Thank you. Let's talk about reporting of hate crimes, which is an issue in and of itself. Underreporting is a real thing. The Department of Justice Hate Crime Victimization Report estimates that nationally only 25 to 42% of hate crimes are reported to the police. We know that people who experience hate often do not report it. They may worry about language or immigration status. They may not trust law enforcement or government. But it's important to report hate crimes. The data is essential. Not reporting hate crimes can raise the level of violence. But reporting hate crimes sends a message that the community will not tolerate these kinds of crimes. And by reporting it, you take steps to help yourself and prevent future incidents. Reporting hate crimes allows people to access the Illinois Attorney General's Crime Victims Compensation Program. This program assists victims in paying bills and expenses that result from acts of violence. Those funds can be used to pay for medical or dental treatment, mental health services, income loss, funeral and burial expenses, relocation, and more. Reporting also gives us data so that we know what it's like to live in our community and how we as individuals and as communities, as policymakers, and people working to build a safe and healthy community can act. That data is used to direct resources, funding, and policy. And so we want to make sure that these protected classes can access that.
It's important to state too that when you are in Illinois, you are covered by these laws. It is regardless of citizenship, everyone has the right to report discrimination. Everyone has the right to report hate crimes, and you're protected in the state just for being within the state. One of the resources that we're working on is a helpline. Where next March we'll be launching a statewide bias and hate helpline that'll be comprised of an online portal and a live call center where people that are affected by hate can call and get help. That will go live in March. It'll be separate from law enforcement because sometimes that's a barrier where people feel like they're not comfortable if law enforcement's involved. This helpline will help callers identify the options for next steps after a hate incident, and that includes the criminal, like reporting to law enforcement, but it will also help people that are targeted for hate connect with people that they trust. So exactly like the group we're working with today, Arab American Family Services, we want to be able to empower people. So if they experience hate, they're going to go to who they trust. They're going to go to Arab American Family Services. We want to work with Arab American Family Services and other groups that are out there so that they know what to do and that they can work with us. This will hopefully help with the data collection as well that Marvette talked about. If we're in Chicago, and many of the people we believe that are on today are, those calls go to the Chicago Police Department. And to explain the process of reporting, I'd like to introduce Norman White, who's our hate crimes victim advocate at the Chicago Commission on Human Relations. Hey, Norm.
Hello, good morning. Hello, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be here. But I have to be honest with you. I'm here with a very, very heavy heart that we have to be here under these circumstances because there's just so much going on. And like I said, this is very important information. Earlier, you touched on it's great that you've been able to define what a hate crime is because this is very useful in empowering communities and individuals and providing them tools because one of the issues that we run into sometimes is that people don't know what the definition of a hate crime is. And if they don't know what the definition of a hate crime is, how do they report it as a hate crime? So we always work under the assumption that most crimes that happen are underreported or never reported at all. But the way it works here in Chicago, for example, first of all, I'm with the Chicago Commission on Human Relations, and we fight discrimination in the city of Chicago. We also deal with community tensions based on race, religion, et cetera, et cetera. And we do advocacy for victims of hate crime. So the way that works, for example, if a hate crime happens, what we always tell folks is make the police your first line of defense. Call the police because that's very important. Once the police get to you, it's very important to describe to the police what happened. If you feel that you've been the victim of a hate crime, or if you feel that you've been targeted because of your association, because you're a member of a particular group, it's very important to tell that to the police, because if you don't tell them that, then it's never recorded as a hate crime and we never get it. So, for example, if somebody feels that they've been a victim of a hate crime and they describe it as a hate crime, what happens? The Chicago Police Department has a special unit within the department called the Civil Rights Unit, and that goes into the Civil Rights Unit. That report, and they investigate it. And once the Civil Rights Unit gets that report, it comes to our offices, and we're able to contact the victim to see if they need any services. If for some reason somebody's been identified, the perpetrator has been arrested or identified. If there is a court case, we track the court case from the moment it hits the court system until there's some sort of resolution. Now, these court cases can take months. These court cases can also take years, but we track the cases. We work with the state's attorney's office. We work with law enforcement. And sometimes, these hate crimes are just symptoms of what's going on in a particular community. So when that happens, if there is a community tension, we work with our elected officials, we work with community leaders to try to address these particular issues. That's why what I always tell people, if some people might not think, well, maybe this wasn't a hate crime, maybe it wasn't, or whatever, report it anyway. Because if we can get that data, if there's particular things that are happening in a particular community, we can identify that, we can red flag that, and let law enforcement know. So it's very important for people to feel empowered, because a hate crime is not just a crime against an individual, but it's a crime against an entire community of people. And that's one of the things that we're trying to address here in Chicago. Like I said, with the tensions with what's going on right now in the Middle East, the numbers are going up. As soon as that happened, we knew they're going up, and they are going up. So, like I said, what we want is for people to feel empowered in reporting these hate crimes, because if you don't report it, it never happened. Now, I know that our only responsibility is here in Chicago. But let me tell you what happens outside of, we also are aware that we have people that work in the city. They may not necessarily live in the city, who come and they go to the theater, they do other things in the city. If they're victims of a hate crime, they need to definitely identify. Now, whatever happens outside of the city has an impact in what happens inside the city. We've had some very horrific incidences that happen. And what we do is, for example, is if something happens outside of the city, it does has an impact in the city, just like what's happening in the Middle East is having an impact. So we get calls also from people that are from outside the city. And what we do is we refer them to the proper agencies, just like the Illinois Human Rights, we refer them. We have no borders. Technically, and the reality is we only work with victims in Chicago, but we get calls from all over the place, and we help refer them um, to other agencies that might be able to take that. For example, every case that we get here in the city automatically goes to the FBI. So that information is being passed around to agencies, so that people can get support. And I'll leave it at that, and I'll for the next Q&A.
Bring up
Fantastic.
slide 7.
I know we have some questions. Marvette, do you want to give us the first question, and we'll just go through and get to as many as we can? Also, there's an email address that'll be coming by in a moment on the screen that you can send us additional questions. There it is. It's idhr.cdhc@illinois.gov. You can also send us emails if you just need more information beyond this meeting, and we can follow up with you later as well. Marvette.
Sure. So a number of questions, and thank you for those participating. The first question, how can we push back at schools that suspend our children for wearing the keffiyeh Palestinian scarf? What can we do?
I can take that. And then I would say for any of us, if anyone wants to jump in, please do. I would recommend first going to the school's administration, the principal, and or the superintendent, depending on the size of the school, and letting them know that this has happened. And then if there's not able to get resolution at the school level, you can contact the Illinois Department of Human Rights and let us know, and we can follow up directly with that school as well. Schools are a little challenging depending on the nature of the school. So, for example, public schools, there's probably more robust protections, where private or religious schools have different freedom of speech protections. So for example, unrelated to this issue, a Catholic school is not going to likely not going to teach positively about the LGBT community, or there may be different standards of what kids can wear based on a school uniform, things like that. But that's something that I would believe you first start with the principal, and then reach out to us if there's a challenge. Norm, I know you're there, so if there's anything you want to add for the city, please let me know. Oftentimes the Chicago Commission on Human Relations takes the similar cases, if not exactly the same.
Yeah, we've been involved with schools. We work closely with schools. So if any issues come up with the schools, like I mentioned before, we do have we can open it up as a community tension. We've approached the schools. We talk to the schools. We talk to the teachers to see if we can find some sort of resolution. So we are involved in those type of disputes. If you feel that maybe the school or maybe your job or whatever is not taking the appropriate steps, you could always call the commission, and we'll take that and we'll see if we can resolve it, and see if we can take it to a mediation and make the school a little bit more responsive about what the complaint is about.
Thanks. I'll also mention Senate Bill 90 passed this year. It goes into effect of August of next year. It'll create mandated training for all teachers and administrators. It's called the Racism Free Schools Act. It applies to all protected classes. The training goes to private schools as well. It's a mandated training that provides tools and resources on how schools and teachers can respond, primarily to bullying and harassment.
Can I add something else? Because the
Always.
commission, we've been going to the schools, and we've been doing workshops, not just for students, but also for teachers, for parents, on bullying, hate crimes. And, we feel that it's very important to really, like I mentioned before, to educate the community, so that they can feel empowered. So we worked with a lot of schools. Obviously, when COVID happened, everything kind of shut down, but we're still getting out there trying to work with different members of the community and trying to educate them about hate crimes, about bias, and do diversity trainings.
You got it going on. I'm going to give you the next question. What are our options when you reach out to the police, but they aren't taking it seriously because there was no physical threat in the situation? Is that covered by free speech?
Well, one of the things that we've been seeing is I explained how the system works, where a hate crime happens or an incident happens. The police are called on the scene, and they take the information, it goes to civil rights. Civil rights sends it to us, and we get involved. But sometimes, for whatever reason, we've gotten phone calls from people. I mean, there are communities that have issues with law enforcement. There are communities that they might have a language barrier. There are communities, you have the undocumented community too, where they don't feel comfortable reporting anything. So sometimes we do get the phone calls. And first of all, Chicago's a sanctuary city. So, if you've been a victim of a crime or what have you, if you report, that's not gonna have any impact on your immigration status. So we always encourage people to do that. So what's happened in the past is they've called us, and what we do is we take the information, we contact the civil rights unit and pass on that information to them, and then the civil rights unit, they will interview the individual and see if if it was a hate crime or if it was a hate incident or anything like that. So it's worked the opposite way, and we definitely encourage that because what we want is people to feel empowered. Like I said, you have folks that in their home countries, maybe law enforcement or government, is not somebody, an entity that you go to first. And that's why, we want this to be another option. And Jim, you had mentioned that, we're working on other uh, options of reporting hate crimes.
Thanks. I know if Idadel is available, if we can add her to the screen, that would be great. And I welcome back. And one of the questions was with the race training, would the Arab American community be involved? That's just the name of the bill. So I think it was the name to pass the bill was the Racism Free Schools Act. It covers all protected classes. So it'll provide support to all the protected classes. I was going to pass it to, first of all, let me make sure with Idadal, have you gotten any other questions or did you have any that you want to pose to the group on behalf of your association?
Oh, we're having trouble with sound.
Let me see if that's on mine that I can correct. It says it should be there.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. One question is that we received a lot, and a lot of our clients continuously ask after 9/11, and recently one of my staff said she has another resident next to her who unleashes his dog as she walks by with her kids. And I mean, Marvet knows as Arab Americans, we're really scared of dogs to begin with. But and again, something with this is a cultural thing. But he unleashes the dog when she and her kids are walking from the car to their building, and she says she's always afraid that he's, she doesn't know what to do, so she stands there with her kids until the dogs walks around them and sniffs and everything else. Others have said, do we have a right to pepper spray? Because a lot of our community members are starting, especially our women, are buying pepper spray for protection. And it's, what is the legality of that? I mean, I know how much dogs are loved, and absolutely they as they should be, but at the end of the day, she's afraid for her children, as a lot of our other women. So what does that constitute as a hate, and will she be, you know, uh, sued for pepper spraying this dog?
Well, I would say I love my dog, but I know he should be on a leash. I'll pass that to Norman for his advice.
Yeah, like I mentioned before, we do deal with community tensions, and something like that. If they would call and obviously, I'm limited to the city of Chicago, but if anybody calls, we try to find, we try to find the organization or point them in the right direction. But if this was in the city of Chicago, definitely we talk to the mom and tell them what the problem is, and at some point, if they're interested in us engaging with that neighbor, we would go to the neighbor's home. We would go knock on the door and we present the whole problem and see if the neighbor would be willing to sit down with the mother or with the affected party and see if they can work out some sort of agreement. And we've done that before, so that would be a remedy for, that we would use here in the Chicago Commission on Human Relations, since it's not at a criminal level. No laws have been broken or anything like that, but this seems to be a dispute between neighbors. One of the things that I did fail to mention is that every hate crime that we get, we notify the alderman as to that a hate crime took place in their community so that they're aware of it. But yeah, we deal with situations like that. But like I said, if we get phone calls from outside the city, we'd be more than happy to try to refer them somewhere.
And I hope it is said that we might need a Norman White in the South Suburban region, especially in this times. But I think that might be some route. Hopefully we can take to. But calling the police is the right thing to do for our community members. And that's what we're trying to encourage them to. Any incident, no matter how small or how big, please report it. Please talk about it, because this will help us to move forward. And doing what Marvette had said in the beginning is to educate, is to start dialogue, is to start talking about it. And the more we're afraid, because after 9/11, we didn't have the opportunity to report these things. Um,
Yeah, and what I also tell people is, if you feel comfortable enough, always use the police as your first line of defense. You
Perfect.
got to get law enforcement involved somehow.
I'd say we all need a Norman White, but I think certainly Norman and I have both found in our roles that a lot of times, the police handle it great and they know what to do. A lot of times they don't know exactly the rules, and so we've certainly had incidents. I mean, I can think of one just about a year ago now, where a woman at a bar, a bartender, had a beer bottle thrown at her, had anti-Semitic comments yelled at her. Someone in the bar reported it as a hate crime, and the cops didn't see it as a hate crime because they're like, oh, we've already addressed it. It was a physical assault or whatever it was. And Norman's office was able to intervene and have the cops go back and be like, this is what a hate crime looks like. They were able to go back and change the charges on that case. So even if they've addressed it, it could very well be that the law enforcement thought they did the right thing, and there's sort of a better or more comprehensive way to look at the problem. So it's always a call worth making.
Yes.
I thought, Marvette, it may be helpful to go through some of the tips that we've identified for leaders in our communities.
So if we can bring up slide 7 and 8.
Oh, great.
Yeah. And I just want to mention, before I jump right into this, that I hope one of the biggest takeaway with this presentation and conversations like this is that there are resources available. That first and foremost, don't feel defeated or scared to report crimes to the police, and that it doesn't stop just there. There's organizations like Arab American Family Services for our community, and what Norman White represents, and our elected officials, that we will work together and report it up the ladder, so to speak, so that hopefully together we lower the temperature and we prevent atrocities from happening. So some tips for community leaders, and I can jump right into it, Jim, if that's okay.
That'd be great.
And we mentioned this, that the increased hate incidents and increased fear in the community can be exhausting for community leaders and members, even if you're not case managers per se who deal with the hate incidents. But people will come to you for help and support. We offer a few thoughts about how to hold your community members, those who have experienced hate incidents and those who are fearful. And that is to lead with calm, to not panic, which can also incite. Do your best to reduce fear. Communicate that the victim is not alone, that there is a community behind them that looks like them and that does not look like them, that the perpetrator does not represent this city, state, or country. To be suspicious of what you read on social media. Check sources. Be wary of the many people who want to rile us up with false, one-sided, and outrage-fueled information that unfortunately is behind what happened to that little boy, going into what may trigger somebody to do these kinds of things. Understand that people are traumatized, that people who experience hate incidents, including those who feel targeted and are fearful, they often endure profound physical and psychological injuries. And answering questions about bias-related incidents may be very difficult for the victim. It can be very humiliating and shameful, and especially when the bias incidents are violent. They may not be able to talk about the incident. They may need to postpone the conversation until they feel able to continue, and to minimize the potential for re-traumatization. I think this impacts not just the victim directly, but people that may look like the victim. I personally have felt that way, seeing and hearing what's going on in the news. And it is incredibly traumatic. And so I feel for the victims, and I know many of us are in that same boat. So avoid asking them to repeatedly describe disturbing events, is something to consider. And of course, as Jim mentioned and Norman mentioned, refer victims to appropriate resources. If the incident seems like a crime, advise or help them report it to local law enforcement. If they're not sure, call and report it anyways. Other resources include mental health support. I can't stress that enough. Legal services, help with housing, and developing and fostering relationships with local law enforcement is key.
Absolutely.
Thank you. We're getting close to wrapping up. I did want to thank some people that you can't see on the screen. There's Alana Khan, who is the executive director of our discrimination and hate crimes, who has jumped in fast and helping us get this set up and is working throughout the community. Victoria Villapando and Jay Epps, who are making whatever's happening on this screen work. So I appreciate your work. And then I want to thank our department, the Illinois Department of Human Rights, for hosting this session. It is imperative that Illinois addresses the hate and discrimination being experienced by marginalized communities. And the Department of Human Rights supports these communities by focusing on improving fair housing discrimination and the processes there, and any kind of discrimination we see, whether it's employment, whether it's public accommodation. We all should be treated respectfully and well for who we are or who we love. And at the end of the day, that's the goal, is to treat people with the same kindness and humanity that we would want for ourselves. We've gone through different examples. Obviously, is when we look at the tragic incident of a 6-year-old, an innocent 6-year-old being stabbed by a landlord, that's a blatant hate crime. I mean, and we can see it and we understand it, but we know there is so many degrees that we have to look at, and marginalized communities are dealing with this all the time in a million different ways. It could be the most nuanced forms of hate and discrimination. It may be in things like unfair rent increases, or just all kinds of ways. If you feel that in any way that something has been unfair that's happened to you, whether it's your pay or a landlord doing something, trying to kick you out because of your race or religion, bring those to us. We really want to be able to investigate it. And even the investigation provides an opportunity. There's mediations possible throughout the entire process. Our conciliation is available, but it creates really a forced dialogue between the two partners, and bringing in all the legal tools and the resources that our state have. Before we leave, I want to check in with my panelists and see if there's anything else anyone wants to share or say as we wrap up.
I just want to stress a big thank you to Itidel Shalabi and Neriman Taha over at Arab American Family Services for all they have done for so many years, but for having the vision to reach out to our commission, and for recognizing that together we are stronger, and to not work in isolation. Really, that is at the heart of helping our community members now and into the future. So I want to thank you for all that you do. I know it's not easy.
Thank you. Thank you, Marvin, for those kind words. And thank you for having this and agreeing to be part of it and allowing our community to be empowered and understand their rights. And I would say the last things, that for those who have the power and for those who have been marginalized, if any employer or a school administration or police officers, when you come out to our community members who've just been hurt, right, with any comment, whether it's protected or not protected, just to acknowledge that we're heard, just to acknowledge that we understand what you're going through, and explain this may or may not lead to being a police report filed, goes a long way to acknowledge the presence of those who have been marginalized and silenced, and not being given that space to say this hurt me. I think that's really what we want to impress on those who are in power positions, is to work with communities to say, we hear you, we see you. And this is what Neriman and I always continue to do, is to say to our community, we hear you, we see the pain, but we want to use the law to protect it in the best way interest. And if the law doesn't match what we need, as we know, we can advocate for changing the law. And so we really appreciate this opportunity to be here today.
Thank you. Norman.
Yes, I also wanted to say that if you're in the city of Chicago, you feel that you've been discriminated in the areas of housing, public accommodation, or employment, you can file a complaint here with the city, and it's free. And I tell people, listen, if sometimes things happen and people are like, well, I'm not sure if it was discrimination, do it. You know, because it's a free service, it's free. You don't lose anything either. And one of the things that I also wanted to say is that, you know, we were, we were out there trying to build bridges between communities. The last 5 years, we were doing iftars, and we were doing iftars um, in police districts. It started out with one police district, and this came about because, with the whole Al Qaeda thing and all that sort of stuff that was going on a few years ago, we decided, along with members of the community, that it would be very helpful to because there's a lot of misinformation about the Muslim community. So we started having iftars in different police districts, and we got to the point where we did iftars in every Ramadan at 5 different police districts. We did one at police headquarters, and it was really an amazing experience because people of all different races, religions got together, and they realized that, you know, we have a lot more in common. And it was a great opportunity because, some people do have issues with law enforcement. To actually have an iftar at a police station, people would walk up to us and say, listen, I didn't even know that we could come here. So that helped build bridges between the police and the community. For example, when we did one of the iftars, at the police station with members of a local mosque, they got to know each other and they got to develop relationships too. So that was something that we were very proud of, and we hope that we can pick that up again. But my message is that we can't remain silent, because it becomes a cancer, and we can't allow racism and bias to remain unchallenged, you know, and hate. And I just want to leave a little quote. Hate has caused a lot of problems in the world, but it has never solved one yet. And that was said by Maya Angelou. But like I said, please report, be safe. And there are people out there that care. And I'm sure that everybody in this panel is doing this not because it's their job, but it's because who they are. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I um, I I couldn't agree with you more, and I hope that what we've left everyone with is that we are not powerless. We are not powerless against hate. I love and kindness go such a long way, and Chicago is known as a city that, with all of its differences, works hard to bring people together. And in this state, the laws are with us, and our goal is to bring the hearts and minds along. So we will continue these dialogues as we go forward. The email that we provided, idhr.cdhc@illinois.gov, is always open. So if you're a member of another group, or you believe that it would be helpful to have us come and speak to someone, or there's questions you have, that's a place that you can turn to. And again, thank you, Marvette. Thank you, Idadal. Thank you, Norman, for joining us, and the people behind the scenes, and all of those who are watching. And we'll continue this hard work towards peace.